Do you want to draw lively, fun expressions for your characters? I do, but all of my drawings always have such boring expressions. I'm going to learn how to draw expressions, both realistic and stylized, and I'll show you any tips, tricks, and secrets I learned along the way. Let's get started. So, what actually creates the expressions of the face in the first place? The facial muscles. We have muscles around the eyes and lots of them that pull on the lips and eyebrows. And as artists, we obviously need to be familiar with anatomy, so you need to start by memorizing every single muscle on the face, and not only that, but just knowing where they are isn't enough because you have to know which muscles are being used when you make certain faces, except I didn't do any of that. Of course, that doesn't mean I ignored the muscles entirely. Yes, anatomy is important, and if I want to draw realistic expressions, eventually I will need to study these muscles. But there's a lot, and it's a bit overwhelming. So I think it's okay to take your time. I started by examining different expressions and how they looked, starting with the most basic, happiness. Let's say you ask a non-artist to draw a happy face. They would probably draw something like this. I think most everyone understands that when someone is happy, their lips stretch horizontally and the corners of their mouth turn upward. The muscle that pulls the lips sideways and upwards is called the zygomaticus major. Oh wow, that is a mouthful, isn't it? But like I said earlier, you don't need to remember that. I'll show the relevant names of the muscles on screen just in case. But anyway, the mouth isn't the only part of this expression. You know how some smiles look fake? You probably already know this, but that's because of the eyes. Without muscles raising the cheeks and narrowing the eyes, the smile doesn't look quite right. And not only that, the muscles can also create furrows or wrinkles, such as smile lines or crow's feet, which become especially prominent on older individuals. To learn how to draw this, I practiced by looking up examples of happy expressions on Google and Pinterest, making sure to include the details of narrowed eyes and wrinkles. But what about stylized characters? I really enjoy drawing anime-style characters, so I looked at Dungeon Meshi for reference. The smiles look something like this. That looks pretty different from a realistic smile, doesn't it? It's a lot more simple for starters. Was there even a point in studying the realistic expression in the first place if we just want to draw stylized characters? But remember, even if these faces are simplified, they're still based on reality. It's good to be aware of what the stylized face is trying to approximate. Anime characters often close their eyes when smiling. Naturally, we don't do this in real life, but those closed eyes do simulate the narrowed eyes. There's also one more problem with stylized faces that I didn't really think about at first. Okay, consider this. Here is a stylized character, and here is a stylized grandma. Yeah, they look basically the same, but suddenly the character looks much older when you add just a few lines and wrinkles. So you have to be extra careful about adding them when you're trying to draw younger characters. In a way, abiding by this means that we're losing one tool we can use to communicate a character's emotions. But fortunately for us, this won't be a big problem for the emotion of happiness. I tried drawing one of my own after my studies and decided to go for some kind of concealed giggling kind of look. I lowered the head and raised the shoulders to try to give it more personality. And even though technically the shoulders are not part of the face, some people call the shoulders the eyebrows of the body. They can be really expressive as well. I suppose drawing stylized expressions isn't too hard after all. But I don't think I was ready for what was coming next. But that's gonna come later, so for now, let's move on to the next expression. Sadness. Once again, most people know what sadness is supposed to look like. These two muscles are responsible for pulling the mouth and lips downwards. Most people will also know to draw this on their sad face, some eyebrows angled upwards. The eyebrows are pulled together, forming wrinkles between them while also being raised upwards. Again, when looking at more stylized faces, as long as you have the inner eyebrows going up and the corners of the mouth going down, the character will look sad. But there's also something unique to stylized characters that we can use to communicate sadness. We can make use of well-understood symbols. And by that I mean something like this exaggerated river of tears, for instance, to indicate sadness. Depending on what style you're drawing in, you can make use of these to efficiently express emotion. Now for my own attempt. I have tried to draw expression sheets in the past, but I don't think I've ever tried to draw intense emotions. They're all pretty mild. So this time I wanted to make the character really sad. I wanted it more extreme. I started by adding some lines in between the eyebrows to really make them feel like they were being scrunched together. I also took extra care with the shape of the mouth, trying to make sure the corners of the mouth were really getting pulled down by those muscles. And I don't think it ended up too bad. So far, I'm not too upset with how these are turning out. Alright, everyone knows how to draw a happy face, and everyone knows how to draw a sad face. But what would you do if someone asks you to draw a disgusted face? I think this expression is a lot less well understood than the previous two, so let's break it down. A disgusted face looks something like this, like you're smelling something bad, for instance. So naturally, it might make us wrinkle our nose. The nostrils also flare and get kind of pulled upwards by these two muscles with very long names. Honestly, drawing these disgusted expressions was a lot of fun, but when I tried studying the stylized version, this is where I ran face first into a major problem. So remember what I said earlier about how we typically want to avoid drawing wrinkles? It feels like this expression is really all about those nose wrinkles and deep folds between the nose and the mouth. So this makes it a bit tricky. But that's not even the worst part. Flared nostrils? What nostrils? I draw the nose as a line or a dot. How can I express disgust without these things? So I started by taking a closer look at the muscles that actually flare those nostrils, and that's when I noticed. Those muscles are also connected to the upper lip. They're the ones that are responsible for a snarling expression. If we look back at the realistic expressions, you can actually see the tops of the lips being lifted into that distinctive shape, even as they are being held closed. And I think that's how we can express disgust in a more simplified way, just by making sure the upper part of that mouth has that shape. Now I know it doesn't seem that hard, but for whatever reason, I kinda struggled to get the shape of that mouth right. It was my first time even attempting to draw this expression on my own, so I definitely had a really hard time. And there's also one more thing I noticed. Sometimes in the stylized version, the shape of the eyes and pupils are distorted a little bit, so I tried the same thing. And here is how it turned out. Honestly, it was pretty rough, but I'm pretty happy with the results. So I was feeling pretty confident for the next expression. Surprise. This one usually isn't too difficult. If you ask someone to draw a surprise face, they'll probably draw something like this. The most important features are the raised eyebrows and widened eyes. When studying this expression in people, as long as the whites of the eyes are showing around the irises, I think the feeling of surprise comes across fairly clearly. The raising of the eyebrows is caused by the frontalis, but wait, wasn't there an expression that already used this muscle? You're right. Sadness. Don't forget that multiple expressions can use the same muscle, but not only that, feelings are complex. Sometimes there can be a complicated blend of multiple emotions at once, which leads to a correspondingly complicated expression. Fortunately, just plain old surprise isn't that complicated, so the stylized version wasn't too hard for me. I just had to make sure that the eyes were opened really wide. And to make that even clearer, the irises are sometimes shrunk down to really emphasize that wideness. But when I finished, honestly, I feel like this looks a little bland. I was trying to go for more extreme expressions, so I definitely played it too safe here. But I did do it for a reason, because I was worried that making someone look super surprised might make it look too similar to the next emotion. Fear. On the surface, a fearful expression looks kind of similar to surprise actually, in that the eyes are opened really wide, this time presumably to take in the threat. But there's a lot more tension in the face. A lot of the muscles used for the negative emotions here are also activated, including raised eyebrows and wrinkles in the forehead, and in particular, the platysma. But this muscle isn't actually on the face, it's actually way down here on the neck. And it can tense up when a person is fearful or feeling other tense emotions. However, this level of detailed anatomy is not usually shown in stylized drawings. Again, many things are often simplified away. So without this, how can I make sure that the fear comes across clearly in a stylized drawing? How can I show this tension? But then I noticed something. This was so obvious that I'm actually pretty shocked I didn't notice until now. The actual shape of the eyebrows and the mouth. Look, the more irregular and lumpy the shapes are, the more tension in the face is implied, and if I think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. Let's look again at all the muscles on the face. A lot of these muscles are actually very thin, so they'll only pull on a small section of the entire eyebrow or mouth. And when they're tensed up, they'll cause the eyebrow or mouth to turn into an irregular shape. And I think this is how I can effectively imply that tension without having to draw very complicated anatomy. And to really hammer home that tension, we can definitely add some of these wrinkles around the face, like you can see in this example. But hang on a second. Didn't I say earlier that you typically don't want to draw wrinkles on stylized faces because they won't look appealing or something like that? Well, first, let me clarify what I mean when I talk about appeal. Namely, it's what you see when you look at popular media. For the most part, it means youthful, attractive characters, because that's just what people like, and adding wrinkles would make them look less youthful. But remember, as an artist, you don't necessarily have to follow what's popular. If it makes you happy, you can draw as many wrinkles as you like. And even in popular media, more detailed expressions are often used for a dramatic or comedic effect. In the end, it's your decision. You can choose how you want your character to look and express themselves. Anyway, let's move on to the final emotion, anger. Fortunately, this one is actually pretty well understood. It's characterized by eyebrows that are angled downwards, as well as wrinkles on the nose and wrinkles around the mouth. Honestly, it's pretty easy to portray this emotion in a stylized way. As long as the brows are angled downwards, it reads clearly enough. However, like before, you can always add intensity to the anger by adding tension, expressed by more wrinkles and irregular shapes. And anyway, if all else fails, you can always rely on the good old anime vein pop. Yeah, just demo it on my VTuber. When I tried to draw anger in the past, I think the furthest I ever got was this sort of mild annoyance. So I wanted to challenge myself this time, and I really wanted to strengthen the feeling of anger. So I started with a glaring look, and I really made sure to emphasize the wrinkles on the face. I also gritted the teeth and made sure that the mouth was a really irregular shape to make it look tense. Here's how my expression sheet turned out. How do you think I did? I feel like I learned a lot from doing these expression studies, and I hope this video was helpful for you too. If you liked it, draw an expression on the subscribe button, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye!